Welcome to the Indiana Athletic Trainers Association podcast. The IATA is dedicated to advancing the profession of athletic training and empowering membership through advocacy, education, networking, and innovative resources. To find out more about the IATA, check out our website and social media pages. The views and opinions expressed by speakers, guests, or others who have provided materials to and for this podcast are not necessarily those of the IATA. The IATA assumes no responsibility for nor endorses any of the comments, recommendations, or materials that are provided. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the IATA podcast. My name is Daniel Welty and host of this episode. And I'm excited to continue our past president series on the podcast and have a great past president on the episode today. And we have Craig Voll, the 13th president of the IATA. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Yeah. Well, you're no stranger to the athletic training community, but maybe just kind of give some people a quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah. So as you said, my name's Craig Voll. I did not realize that I was the 13th president until you had until you had just said that. So, but yeah, been. Let me start with just a general introduction. I always love to throw this in there, but I was born and raised in the greatest city on the face of the earth, Cleveland, Ohio. But came to Indiana in 1998 and was lucky enough to be able to work under Denny Miller and Larry Leverance up at Purdue. Um, Primarily was a clinical athletic trainer, and to be honest, it was a little while before I even thought about wanting to give back to the profession I love, and kind of begin the process of volunteering. It was about 2006 when I made a decision that I was going to attempt to run for president-elect in Indiana, and really it came from, there was, I think it was about 2004, 2005. There was a letter to the editor, and it was titled "Who Will Be the Next Pinky Newell?" And obviously, being here at Purdue, in every building that we have, every athletic training facility, and every classroom, we have a picture of Pinky in there. And I always said it's kind of like a Scooby-Doo cartoon, in that, no matter where you were in the room or in the building, it just looked like Pinky was looking at you. Right. And so hearing the stories that Denny would tell, or some of the old timers here at Purdue that actually worked with Pinky, it really began to inspire me. And the letter to the editor really lamented the fact that it didn't seem that younger athletic trainers were getting involved. And really it was a call to action as who's going to be that next Pinky Newell, that next visionary leader. And at that point, I realized I was kind of the problem. I had, not really been engaged and involved. I was just starting out my career, and, drinking through a fire hose as I was learning how to be, an athletic trainer at a Division I school. And I finally started to get my sea legs, and Denny Miller and Larry, they both encouraged me to dip my toe in the water. And so I ran in 2006, and luckily for me, I ran unopposed because I won. And that really springboarded me to an amazing almost 25 straight years of executive leadership experiences. And I would not give it back for anything. I've met some amazing people along the way. Um, was involved in things that are much bigger than me. And what I've always said, it was just amazing to work with a group of people that didn't care who got the credit, that we were really focused on doing things that would better our membership, but also would better the profession of athletic training. And we use that a lot of times as our magnetic north as we were trying to make decisions and and do different things during my time at Indiana in Indiana executive leadership. So um, worked at Purdue for quite a few years, but then realized that my true calling I felt like was in teaching, and so got out of the day-to-day athletic training room and started to pursue my PhD. Was able to complete that, and my first job was at the University of Indianapolis as an assistant professor, and that's where I got to meet you, Daniel. And so had an amazing almost 4 years at the University of Indianapolis, really helped with the transition from the undergraduate to the graduate program. Um, but for family reasons, I just wasn't able to move down to Indianapolis, and I was commuting. And I've always said it's mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter. And for almost 4 years, I didn't mind the drive, but that hour and 15-minute commute one way was starting to wear on me, and had an opportunity to begin and to create a sports medicine program up in the Lafayette area with Franciscan Health. And so was able to do that. And we had I had a team of 42 athletic trainers, 3 team physicians. We had 14,000 athletes and almost 36 schools that we provided athletic training services for. And it was an amazing time, and it was an amazing group, and learned some extremely valuable lessons. Um, and then had an opportunity to come back to Purdue and teach, and that's what I'm doing now. So I teach both in the undergraduate component, our sports medicine concentration, which is an opportunity to get kids that are, I shouldn't say kids, I should, when get young adults who are interested in any of the healing sciences. And so obviously we, have athletic training, but then also physical therapy, occupational therapy, PA, medical school. What we're able to do is we're able to help them, and in my role, help to mentor them and guide them and help them make a decision that's best for them, give them all the information that they need to make the best decision. So I get to work with the undergraduate students, and then more importantly, I get to work with the graduate students with the MSAT here at Purdue. So, you know, I've kind of found my forever home, and I really think all the stops that I've had along the way in my career, whether it's clinically, but then also with some of my leadership and volunteer positions, I think have made me the best version of myself currently. And I have a lot. I feel like I have a lot that I can give students in regards to just advice. I always said, those, you tend to, as you age, you tend to have more wisdom as you age. And a lot of that is because you tend to make a lot of mistakes along the way, and hopefully you learn from them mistakes. And so I feel like I've made a lot of mistakes. I've learned from my mistakes and has made me wise. And I love to share that knowledge, and help people, I would say progress into the career that's the best fit for them. So that's kind of I don't know if that was your exact question, but I was going to give you my biography, and that was a little longer. That would have been a elevator speech on the way up to about the 117th floor. So, so I don't think there's many of those buildings outside of, somewhere over in Qatar or something like that. So,
Well, I do appreciate that and all the background, and obviously it explains, how much you've done in different roles professionally, but then also within the service of athletic training, both at or all three low, I guess, IATA, GLATA, and at the NATA level, and so I want to kind of go back in time a little bit for you, and about the IATA, you talked about
mhm.
Denny and Larry and helping kind of push you along. And so kind of talk a little bit about, that experience and why you're like, yep, I want to take the plunge. I mean, you talked about the Pinky Newell thing, but kind of talk a little bit also about the landscape of athletic training as you were president-elect and as you're going into your role as president.
Yeah. So when I started as president-elect in 2006, and so some of the things we had we had at that time a really robust practice act, which I felt was really kind of the gold standard, and that was done by like Rick Shaw and Kip Smith and some of the older time. David Craig, Ralph Reef, some of the legends that I always say I've stood on their shoulders because, we didn't have to fight those kind of battles. Being in different leadership forums with some of the other state leaders across for, the different associations. And I've always felt like Indiana was blessed in that we never really had to fight that battle of being recognized and being valued in the state of Indiana. I felt like we had a very strong practice act that allowed us to do quite a bit. I've always said it was vague enough that allowed us to be able to do a lot. And then also, right before I got there, they had gone to kind of a law firm that had kind of created a legal opinion of our law, which really enabled us to expand into some of the emerging practice settings. So when I started in 2006, that was really kind of I would say the emerging settings were really starting to take hold there. And by that I mean, athletic trainers in a physician practice. We had some athletic trainers that were actually working in some outpatient therapy clinics, doing athletic training services, but being able to work there and actually do some rehabilitation and physical medicine and rehabilitation. We were just starting into things like performing arts and that. So it was really an amazing time because our practice act really was so broad that it really allowed our members the opportunity to kind of sell themselves and use their skill set to get those kind of jobs. Now, what I noticed right in like 2004, 2005, right before I decided that I wanted to run for president-elect, the state of Vermont had actually passed language that was kind of a reimbursement law, which basically said that insurance companies could not discriminate against athletic trainers, that if their insurance policy reimbursed for physical medicine and rehabilitation, which is basically what physical therapy and occupational therapy is. You could not deny reimbursement to an athletic trainer as long as they were performing under their license and under the direction of a physician with a script and all that. And so what we did was we went with our lobbyist and we said, "Hey, I'd really like the opportunity to get this language passed in the state of Indiana. I think this would be a game changer for us in that we had pockets within the state that were having athletic trainers that were seeing some success with reimbursement, but it wasn't consistent. And if it was denied, then the hospital system or the clinic would just write it off." And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to make this something that was consistent, codified in law. And so I kind of went back and kind of looked at some of our legends. So Rick Shaw, Kip Smith, David Craig, and really asked them to help us because they were instrumental in helping get the initial Practice Act through, and asked them to come back and help me as governmental affairs chair and as some other key components within our executive committee, with the ultimate goal of getting reimbursement law passed that basically would codify in the law that insurance companies could not deny coverage payment to an athletic trainer just because they were an athletic trainer. And so I started the background of that during my entire president-elect. And what I was able to do was it took 2 years. So when I was president, we were not really ready for prime time. And then the first year that I was past president was when we finally got it passed. And I think it ended up passing. There was only one no vote, and I can remember Rick after the final vote say, man, we didn't ask for enough when there was only just one no vote. But that was a game changer because what that then did was it provided model language, and then the NATA kind of with what we had done in Indiana, and then also Wisconsin had done some stuff with Joe Green. They then created the third-party reimbursement pilot, whereas in Indiana was one of the first states that really kind of was joining that, and then they used our language as model language to push across other states. With the thought being, hey, if we, Indiana and Vermont already have this language in place, if we can continue at the state level to get more and more of these and hit critical mass, we're going to be able to get reimbursement for our services. And I've always said that to me, kind of getting either the CMS recognition, which is going to have to take an act of Congress. To be able to get that, I think, is a silver bullet for us, because that's the one reason why everybody points to why our salaries aren't where they necessarily need to be. Now, I will say that I've never seen salaries raise at the rate that I'm seeing them raise right now. And who would have ever thought 10 years ago that athletic trainers were getting retention bonuses and sign-on bonuses of $10,000 and moving expenses and all these kind of things. So I feel like, things like the Damar Hamlin situation, really, and with concussion care, really have put athletic training on the map and really have demonstrated to our key stakeholders what our true value is. And so, I see where, the good thing is we have a lot more practice settings. That's the biggest difference than when I was president. Was we got a lot more practice settings. When I first started in the business, you had the professionals, the professional ranks, you had college ranks, and you had high school, right? And that was the only three practice settings that we had. And 95% of all of our athletic trainers were in those practice settings, those three practice settings. Now, over 58% of our athletic trainers are in the emerging settings. And so, people will say, oh, there's a shortage of athletic trainers. Well, honestly, what the BOC data shows is there's never been more athletic trainers than any time in our history right now. The difference being we have got a lot more opportunities. And I said that there isn't a shortage of athletic trainers. There's a shortage of athletic trainers willing to settle for shitty jobs. Poor work-life balance, poor salaries, poor hours and working conditions and all that kind of stuff. And the practice settings that tend to have the better work-life balance, have the better schedule, the better work days and work schedule. Those are the positions that, like, something is open and there's lots of people that are applying, and those positions do not stay open very long. But it's the other ones where salary isn't up to snuff and the work-life balance or the hours is just not where it needs to be. Those are the ones that are staying open a little bit longer. And I think that's a good thing, right? I mean, people are starting to kind of put their foot down and say, look, we are a healthcare provider, and we provide a valuable service, and we need to be paid commensurate with our with our skill set. So
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say some of your biggest accomplishments? Obviously, getting the language passed
yeah,
from a legislative standpoint was a huge accomplishment of keeping that ball rolling and allowing John Locke and his presidency
yep.
to get that across the finish line. But what are some other great accomplishments you felt like were accomplished when you were president?
I think the other thing that we were able to initiate, and this was not really the IATA specifically being able to do this, but was assisting. The NFL played a big role in this, but was to get our concussion law codified. It was right around the same exact time that HEA 1467 was coming up. And so we were able to basically work with the NFL to get in-state law, which really helped protect our high school athletes, in regards to a state law that required, clearance by a physician that had extra training in concussions. and then also, was able to get the return to play progression that was codified into law. One of the one things, and this is kind of, where, it was important that we had a seat at the table, because I always say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And if you're not, at the table, you don't get a chance to kind of see things and maybe make some suggestions, and then you have to react to something. The initial law that was coming out basically had that athletic trainers were the one, in addition to a physician, could make the actual clearance for return to play for concussions. They wouldn't have had to go. They could have gone to an athletic trainer, or they could have gone to a physician. And honestly, what we said was, look, we work under a physician, and I think having that ultimate responsibility of ultimate clearance, I don't think our members would have realized what that would have done to our liability insurance, because now we would have been the ones liable for making the ultimate decision, through state law. And so we actually asked that that was taken out, that that athletic trainers could make a diagnosis of a concussion, and we could interact with the physicians, but we weren't the ones that were ultimately signing the return. It ultimately had to be a physician, or somebody that's trained in concussions. And so I think that was a big part, a big thing. And then more importantly, I think this isn't necessarily things that quantified or gets into record books or anything like that, but I think one of I would say, things that I'm most proud of is the number of people that I was able to reach out to and that got engaged in state leadership within the IATA Executive Council and all that. And reaching out to students like yourself, Daniel, and maybe getting the service bug put into them, and some of the things that you're doing here with IATA, what you do with GLADA. Those are the things that make me most proud, is the ability to pay it forward, to tap young professionals, and give them something to do. Not something that was unwieldy, but give them the ability to have some success early, enjoy it, and then continue on, and continue to serve. And so I always say that's kind of that ripple effect. That's honestly what I'm, outside of HEA 1467, which I'm extremely proud of. I'm very proud of the legacy of how many young professionals and former students that have gotten engaged into IATA, and started at IATA, maybe began the move up into district or anything like that, or into national. But we're not going to be a vibrant association if we don't have the young professionals that are not only members, but engaged members, that are willing to volunteer their time, their precious time, and to have an active say in some very important things. And the more viewpoints that we have, the better we are as an association. And so, a lot of people think they can't do anything because they're busy. They don't have a lot of time. And I always, said, I'm going to find something for you, even if it's just something little, because once you are engaged and you interact and you start to have fun, guess what? You're going to come back and ask for a little bit more, and you're going to take a little bit more on your plate, and then you're going to take a little bit more on your plate, and success begets success. And then we're going to have that pipeline of, I would say, engaged membership, because that was the one thing that I did notice was, and I don't think it's any different than it is now, but for the most part, our membership was fairly unengaged. You had some very engaged members, but for the most part, you had some apathy out there. And so my goal was, I wanted to try to make people proud of the state association, that if they ever asked the question, what's the IATA do for me? We had an answer, right? We could lead to 3, 4, 5, 6 different things that the IATA was doing for them as a member. And I never wanted somebody to question what their membership dollars was going towards, that they were proud to be a member. And I feel like we were successful in that. When I was president-elect and president, the 2 years I was president, we actually had over 400 people at the state meeting, with almost 200 of them students. And so I truly believe that we needed to have those students engaged with the members because A, that's where mentorship begins. That's where networking begins and the importance of networking within our profession. But then also, if a student comes to the IATA state meeting and has a good experience, guess what they're probably going to do once they become certified? They're coming to the state meeting, right? And they're going to continue to give back to the profession and the association. And so, again, I thought it was critical that we would get those students there. And, I love the fact that those meetings had so much energy, and, we had 400 members there, and it was beautiful. I loved it. And so, yeah, those are some of the things that I would say, pretty proud of during my time there. And then the team that we had, I still think very fondly back of the people that were on the executive committee at the time. We had, I think we had a once in a generation group of people. It was a perfect mix of old grizzled veterans. I would have said I was more in the middle category, at that phase of my career. And then I wasn't a young professional anymore, but I was a mid career athletic trainer. So we had those late career, mid career, and we had a lot of people that had never, young professionals that had never. Had never volunteered before, and we had a great student program with student reps that were then able to go up and not only do stuff here at the state, but then did stuff at GLATA, but then also at the national level. So we had just a great mix of old, young, middle aged, and all that, and we all worked together, and we got so much done. That was the thing. It was like we got so much done in my 6 years because they've since changed the rules, but it was 2 years as president-elect, 2 years as president, and then 2 years as past president. And so it was a 6 year commitment. But I loved every moment of those 6 years. I wouldn't trade it for anything because have some very fond memories of some just great people, great selfless servants that I got to serve with.
And I saw on, if people don't know, there is a great page on the IATA website that lists all of our past presidents. And if you actually click on their name, it'll take you to the thing that talks about their accomplishments and the challenges and words of advice. And I saw that, and that was something I wanted to point out is that it says recruited over 35 volunteers to become involved in serving roles within the IATA. And I
Yeah.
think you made that point very clear of just getting people involved and engaged regardless of what it is. It's all important to the association, to the IATA, and it helps advance us because the IATA is a membership organization, and we need our members to be members. Hey, pay your dues, and then but also, we need you to be engaged and involved. And engagement and involvement, for you could just be as simple as depending on where you're at in your life and your career. It's like just understanding where you're coming from, like answering emails that come to you, reading emails, the news blasts, following us on social media, just staying up to date and involved and engaged that way. And then when you're ready to take the plunge and have some volunteerism, there's always opportunities. One of the committees that we always talk about is like honors and awards. It's a great committee because it's a cool opportunity to kind of see some of those names come through, especially at the Hall of Fame level. That go through and be a part of that group. But that group, 2, 3, 4 months, they work pretty hard. But then the rest of the time of the year, it's pretty low key because there's
Mhm.
not tons of things. So I think there's a lot. I think to your point, Craig, there's a lot of opportunity in different things within the IATA. I think people can get involved with, and it's all about what you want to do. But then I understand that you get involved a little bit, and then you get engaged, and you see people doing stuff and having so much energy and fun doing it that you just kind of want to dive into it and have that experience. So.
Yeah. You mentioned that we did a quarterly newsletter, and I would always have a presidential message, and I would always end every one of my newsletters with a tally of how many new people that I was able to recruit. And by the end of my 2 years as president, that was it. I mean, I had that running tally, and it was amazing. I'd send out that newsletter, and I'd always get one or two people that would email me or call me, and express interest in it, and I'd find something for them. That was the one thing I was like, if I'm going to do this, I've got to find something for them, because I could lose so much credibility if I didn't respond to the email, or didn't have something that fit for them and was able to give them the bug. Because I will say, I mean, there's a lot of, you work full time, and then you're answering emails at 11 o'clock at night or midnight, and, you're tired. But if you don't put that time in, you could lose and really be counterproductive to what we were attempting to do in regards to building interest, and a passion for service within the association.
Absolutely. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, obviously being president, the IATA 2008 to 2010, we're kind of, I guess that's what, 15 years now,
I know. Oof.
2025, if you can believe it. But what is something in athletic training, as a profession, whether it be within the state or just kind of big picture athletic training, that has changed that you never even thought would be possible or thought would even happen within the profession of athletic training over these past 15 years?
I think I think I'll have. I'm going to go two directions with this answer. Number one, I think, is the proliferation of job settings for us. And having so many opportunities to work at Amazon fulfillment centers, or within a physician practice, any of those kind of things. So all of those emerging settings, we were talking about it, but it didn't seem like it was, I don't know if this is the right word, but it didn't seem like it was in vogue. It was, not everybody was interested in that. But now what I think people see is like, look, I've always said, you tended to see a higher number of females in the profession, kind of as young professionals, but about 8 years into the profession, you saw then a switch where there was a higher number of males that were still, certified or practicing as athletic trainers, and less females. And a lot of that was because, unfortunately, we lost a lot of great athletic trainers because they didn't think that they could do what they wanted to do with their life goals in regards to either family or whatever, because of, there was only, working in the collegiate level or in the high school level, and those hours just weren't conducive to what their goals were. But as we have proliferated the opportunities and the different job practice settings out there, we're retaining more and more of these great athletic trainers. Right now, there is a job for you where you can be 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, don't have to work weekends, don't have to work nights, and so there's all those kind of opportunities that have the work-life balance and the work schedule that does fit much better into raising a family or anything like that. And so that is one of the, I think, most important things for the growth of our profession, because we stopped bleeding really good professionals that were leaving the profession, not because they didn't like being an athletic trainer. It's just that it didn't fit their what they were looking for in regards to a lifestyle and all that. So I think that's, definitely one of the more important things. And then, honestly, there was some talk about it, but now that we've gone to the master's program, I've always said athletic training was the O positive blood for healthcare, meaning that we were giving away our best and brightest athletic trainings, as students. When we were in the undergraduate level, less than 50% of all the athletic training students that we graduated actually matriculated into the profession. It was like 46% of all the students that were there. So over 54% of all the students that graduated from athletic training programs never practiced as an athletic trainer. They went on, to become a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a nurse, a PA, a physician, that kind of stuff. But as we've switched to the master's program, we've removed the stepping stone and now it's a destination profession, and so while you hear people complain or may argue that there's a shortage of athletic trainers because we moved to the master's program, I will say again, when you look at the data, and without data you're just a person with an opinion, and when you look at the data, what it shows is, yes, there has been a contraction of athletic training programs. But when you look at the number of students, and we're now retaining close to 75% of those students in a master that graduate from a master's program actually matriculate into the profession. So when you look at, although we have decreased students in athletic training education programs right now, all right, but 75% of them are graduating and going into the profession, that actually is the same number of athletic trainers that we've always graduated. So there hasn't been a decrease in the number of athletic trainers that are matriculating into the profession. It's just now there's a lot more opportunities for them. And so again, bad work-life balance, bad organizational culture, those kind of stuff, not a really good salary. People are saying, I don't want that job. I'm going to go over here and have, and have better, whatever that might be. And so, that not, not seeing, or the one thing that I'm really excited about is that now athletic training has become a destination profession, that people that are going into it want to be an athletic trainer. And then you throw in the fact that more and more of America, more and more of places around Indiana understand what an athletic trainer is and are demanding athletic trainers. That again will continue to increase, the demand, and I really do believe that while there's a contraction and kind of a narrowing of the number of schools, I think we're going to see where what schools are remaining are going to be highly quality, right? And you're going to start seeing more and more students that are going to go into that. Because right now, the biggest argument is the salaries and the debt load and all that. Well, honestly, studies have shown that the debt load is not a major concern, or rationale why students do not enter into, like graduate school and all that kind of stuff. Now, and I also think with our salaries going up a lot over the last 5 years, I think that's going to become less and less because athletic training is 2 years, and our debt load is significantly less than PTOT, PA, and all that. And so I think some of those arguments are going to start fading away, and more schools are going to want athletic trainers, or are going to realize they can't really do stuff without an athletic trainer, especially at the secondary schools. I hate the fact that, like, the rural schools, like I never want healthcare to be determined by the zip code that you live in. And so, I think with the struggles that a lot of healthcare organizations are having, you're seeing where schools are forced to have skin in the game. I think that was one thing, when I was, cutting my teeth in 2006. I mean, that was the model, and I really hated that model where, like, hospital systems or sports medicine programs would give the athletic training services away for free. And I said, we are just, in the long run, we're hurting ourselves. We're devaluing ourselves, because if nobody values something that's free, right? And so, as healthcare organizations have not been able to be so generous with free healthcare, more and more schools realize, like, hey, that's a valuable component of our team, and we can't afford not to have them. And now they're finding opportunities to basically pay for that athletic training service, and now they're skin in the game. So to me, that's beauty, right? We are now being valued, that organizations and schools and all that are realizing, like, hey, we've got to have better work-life balance. We got to work on this culture. We got to work on the salaries, and we cannot have, if we want to have competitive athletics, we cannot not have an athletic trainer. Those are all things that in 2006 we hoped would happen, but I'm really seeing that, like, that's where, like, that's it's a change for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be interesting too, I think, with the data. Obviously we're still within, not too long of master's degrees and
Hmm.
that being the trend, and now obviously no longer have bachelor level degrees at the entry level, professional master. Now it's professional master's degrees, right? But it'll
Yep.
be interesting to see the data right now, where that we have more 75% of people going into the profession. It'll be interesting to see, here in probably 10 years or so, looking at that data and saying, how many of those 75% are still in the
Still
profession,
in.
and comparing that data to what we saw, in years past. And I think that gives us that. But I think to your point, it's like, I think over the next 10 years too, we're going to see continual growth in opportunities for athletic trainers. So I think that gives us an opportunity for continuing to advocate, for who we are and what we do in our skill set, in which if people value us and we provide a good skill set, and hopefully, and what we've always kind of talked about, whether it be industrial setting or performing arts or whatever the case may be, there's a different value, but a lot of times it's cost savings, especially when you start looking at corporate, like an Amazon, right? They're looking at how much money can I save versus sending this all off and then getting billed work comp or something like that, right? Why not have an athletic trainer that's highly skilled to do the rehabilitation right there on site? And then it decreases the amount of time they're off work. But anyways, we could go all day long and talk about those kind of things, right? And the value that we bring. But it'd be interesting to see the data over the time. And but again, exciting times, I think, for athletic training as we continue to move forward.
Yeah. I mean, with what I hope, and this is all conjecture. I have no data because, like you said, we're just starting to collect this data. But my hope is that things are changing for the better, that we're seeing a much larger retention rate 8 years in. We're not seeing that huge drop after about 7 years in the profession and people leaving. That's when we know we're on the right track right there.
Yeah. What's a piece of advice you would give a younger athletic trainer or an athletic training student?
I would say for a student, I always say graduation is not the end of your education. Stay curious, keep learning. Um, you know, I think you can agree that the field of athletic training is extremely dynamic. So staying up to date is critical and crucial. If I treated concussions today like I treated concussions 20 years ago, I'd be sued, right? I mean, and so if I did ACL or rehabilitation the way that I did them 15 years ago, again, things change, data changes, science changes. So I always say, remember that you're entering a rewarding field where your experience can positively impact lives each and every day. Sports medicine and athletic training specifically is like fingerprints. You leave your fingerprints on all of your patients, and you never really truly understand the impact that you've had on them. I can tell you story after story of how somebody that I've run into that was a former athlete of mine, and they tell a story, just about, one day when I made them laugh, told a joke, and it was exactly what they needed at that time, and the impact. You just don't know what's going on in somebody's life at that moment, and so just treating people with kind of that empathy and that kindness is critical, because you can change the trajectory of people's lives, because the beauty of our profession is we're with them every day, right? We can see when they're having a bad day. We can see when they're having good days, and being somebody that they trust and can communicate with is important. And so, never underestimate the impact that you have on somebody's life.
Oh, somebody is always watching you, whether you know it or not. And so that's extremely important. I think all the time people will get asked, what would you give an advice to a young professional, just like I asked you. But I kind of wanted to ask you, now that you've had this, different experiences, different work settings and athletic training, and obviously, your involvement within IATA. What would be a piece of advice that you would give our veteran athletic trainers out there?
I would say appreciate the journey of our profession. Meaning, I think sometimes we get so caught up in the day to day and things aren't exactly the way we want them to be. I always say excellence is an iterative process, and change is never really seen by those that help make the change. It's kind of the next generation. And so I always say it's important that we leave things better for the next generation. I kind of say, think about it, in 1950, the very first NATA conference, when athletic training really, we were 100% men. Now we're 58% female, right? Think about it. 25 years ago, women usually couldn't work men's sport because they would be a distraction. You know, 20 years ago, if somebody had a concussion and got knocked out, chances are, if they passed, how many fingers am I holding up and do you have a headache, we'd let them back in the game. you know, I mean, up until about 5 years ago, there was no women in professional sports. And now you're seeing, so, you know, we're seeing these iterative changes for the better. And I just say, to our grizzled veterans, like we are on the cusp of something great. Look at where we were and where we are now, and then where we're heading. I think it puts things in perspective that, yes, are things where they need to be? No. Are our salaries exactly where they need to be? No. But they're so much better, and we're seeing that consistent improvement year over year. And so being our best versions of ourselves and really showing our value to our employers just makes it that much easier for the next person, that they don't have to fight the battles that we fought. They get to fight different battles, right? And their battles are moving us forward and moving us to a higher plane. They don't have to fight these battles because we fought them. And so I always say, just appreciate the fact that we're on a journey. Look at where we were, look at where we are now, and realize we are still heading, and we still have room to grow, and we will continue to grow, and we will continue to get better. And it's by us focusing on being the best version of ourselves, which then just raises, I always said a rising tide raises all ships. And that's the important part is, don't get focused on the negative aspect of things aren't the way you want them to be or that they should be. You know, realize like, hey, 30 years ago, our female counterparts weren't allowed to work with men's sports, right? And so realize that there was a lot worse problems, but they didn't give up. They kept fighting the good fight. Every day get up, continue to fight the good fight. But again, realize that we're in it for our patients, and that every day, regardless of the noise that's going on with the other stuff, never allow that to interfere with your ability to give quality healthcare and important healthcare, because that's what separates us and differentiates us, and that's what people will remember. And again, that's what allows us to continue to move forward, because somebody in front of me, before me, did such a great job that I didn't have to fight the battle of what an athletic trainer was. They already knew. Now I just had to just continue to learn, learn the new techniques, and continue to bring the highest quality of healthcare to my athletes and to my patients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from a younger professional myself, I appreciate, all the veteran athletic trainers out there that have put in the hard work. And, I remember hearing people talk about, the Practice Act in Indiana, and getting that pushed through, and right going finally getting it, from like registration, and then it became or certification, and then became licensure, and then it was like after that they were kind of like, well, now what? It was like, what's next? And I think that's what we've continued to push forward as in Indiana, especially being leaders and in the athletic training profession nationally. It's what's next and what do we do? And so I appreciate that. And one story I want to tell, and I think you've mentioned it a couple of times about how we've changed over time. Obviously, people know past president and Hall of Fame Ned Shannon.
Hmm.
Obviously, I got to watch Ned and him be one of my preceptors at University of Indianapolis, but I was always amazed, and one of the things that I have always appreciated about athletic trainers over the course of their career is I would always watch Ned do some things, and I'm like, Well, I know he didn't learn that in his education, in the internship probably route, right? I think he worked under Jay Bradley actually, but um, why I know that information, I don't know. But anyways, but I think it was just amazing to watch him do manual therapy things, and I'm like, and that's what it means to be an athletic trainer, to continue to advancing our skills and really trying to provide and do the best we can for our patients. And that's staying up to date on what we need to know, and because it's ever changing. But then in knowing that, I think at least from a young professional standpoint, that um, it's amazing to watch these veteran athletic trainers do all that they've done and then continue to grow and learn and continue to provide the best care they can for their patients.
Right. And I think about what I have to teach now and what I learned when I was, an athletic training student. And I'm just so grateful that, the current athletic training students, they're learning how to suture, right? They may never use it, but at least they have the skill. And if they have a physician and in a situation, they can actually do it, right?
Yeah.
Being able to start IVs. Doing gen med and being able to do, instead of just, hey, go see doc, actually be able to do a gen med evaluation and look at somebody that might have a sinus infection or something like that, and actually truly get back to being the gatekeepers, which is what we're really good at, right? Being the gatekeepers, being able to do an evaluation, have a good idea what's going on, maybe start the treatment or understand what we're referring for, so that we can. I always say we want to make the right referral to the right person at the right time for the right treatment, right? And that's, I mean, and that's where moving to the masters has really allowed us to teach more of that, so that you don't have students that are also taking physics and chemistry and world history at the same time that they're also taking their athletic training courses. And the immersives now, like, one of the biggest things where I feel like a lot of athletic training students washed out was because in the old model they would be in class all morning, and then they would usually get to practice right as, right at for pre-practice. They would go to practice, and then they would do post-practice, and then they would do some events, but they never understood all the rehab that was done in the morning, all the communication with coaches or parents, or communication with doctors and scheduling appointments, and all of that administrative stuff, that O&A class that everybody, hated taking, but always come back and say, man, I wish I would have paid attention, because there is so much that goes on that I didn't realize. But now that we have these immersive clinicals, they actually know. And so if you say, you know what, I want to be a Power 4 football athletic trainer, and you immerse yourself in that lifestyle, you now know going into it, is this what I want? Is this the lifestyle I want? And so that is, to me, the benefit that we've got. And it, like, the students now that are coming out are so much more prepared for the roles that they're going to be asked to take, and to do as now entry level certified athletic trainers. And it just makes me proud to see, again, where we were, where we are now, and knowing that, like, we are still going to continue to learn more and to be more, maybe not as entry level, but there's going to be great opportunities to have specific skill sets that are going to make you highly marketable when you're trying to find jobs. After you've kind of, I wouldn't say pay your dues, but had your entry level job for a couple years, you gain that skill set, and now you're moving on and have a career ladder. Before, it was like you were kind of stuck. Now we've got career ladders that we can go in, because there's so many more skill sets that we can go: dry needling, cupping, whatever, and actually get some certification in that kind of stuff.
Well, Craig, I didn't have any other questions for you. I didn't know if you had anything else that you wanted to say on the podcast or
Nah,
anything, or any
knowing that
Craigisms.
knowing that you were one of my students would have, I'm always interested to hear your take on how your journey has been, because I'm just like a proud papa here, being interviewed by you, knowing that, you're getting involved in doing this.
Yeah, I think when I was at UND, had a good and unique experience, having Chrissy Lauber, Scott Lawrence, and you, Craig. as professors. And I think just showed good role models, like many other, role models and those engaged in the profession. But it was, I always tell people it's like athletic training school for me was like growing up. Like I was like a child and growing up in athletic training. That's how it was. And I had, good role models to show me, okay, why do you get involved and what's the engagement? And then going to IATA meetings and GLATA and seeing you guys up there and doing those things, not for self-glory, but for the glory of athletic training, right? And for advancing what we need to do. And then when something gets accomplished, then it's like it's kind of nice and it feels good, that it's like, man, I was a part of that. It took all of us to make this happen. But to have an instrumental part in that, I think that was really cool to see and watch all that unfold. And then, I think one thing that happens, like many stories, with people getting involved, it's one person over here saying, "Hey, talk to this person or do this," or "Hey, think about this." And literally, I mean, again, I think to your point, small engagement, and then it turns bigger and bigger. Connor Burton, who was a classmate of mine, was involved in the as a student representative and was on the GLATA, and then became young professional chair. But he introduced me to Jim Moore, up at GLATA that takes photos, and then now I help Jim every GLATA to take photos, and now I'm kind of the official, unofficial photographer at IATA events. And then I turned into young professional, committee chair, and then worked with again Chrissy Laubergen, which was an awesome experience for 4 years as professional development chair of the IATA. It was just like one thing led to another, and you're just like, "Yep, I'm here for it. Like this is what I'm involved to do." And I don't know, maybe I don't know my impact just yet, and what this means, just because I think I'm from a younger standpoint. But I know it's important because I think without us pushing forward and pushing the needle forward, I think to your point, if we don't have a seat at the table, we're going to be on the menu. Yeah. Well, Craig, I always ask a fun question at the end of all these podcasts.
Okay.
And so, if you could be an animal, what animal would you be and why?
Oh, yeah, I just for the viewers, you did prep me on this one, and I still struggled. Like I was asking my daughter what she thought I should answer and stuff like that, and she goes, "Maybe a koala bear." And I said, "Yeah, but I don't know about it. I mean, they're cute and cuddly, but other than that." So I came up with a bald eagle. Number one, it's very majestic, right? But I was reading something a while back, and it was talking about like what you can learn, leadership lessons you can learn from an eagle. um, and number one, the big thing is like an eagle has amazing vision, and they can focus on something from like 5 kilometers away, and they do not take their eye off of that until they actually get the prey. And so having a vision and remaining focused, no matter what obstacles that are in your way, will make you successful. Um, then the other thing I always say is, and they made a point of this, like eagles don't eat dead things, meaning that they only feed on fresh prey. And so don't rely on past successes. Keep looking for new frontiers to conquer. Leave the past where it belongs. Use it as a guide, but don't rest on your laurels. Um, and then the last one I always say is like eagles love the storm. When clouds gather, that's when the eagles actually start flying and they get excited because what they're able to do is use the wind from the storm and actually allows them to soar higher, and reach new heights. So, facing your challenges, knowing that they're going to make you and help you emerge stronger on the other side is going to be extremely important. Um, and then the other thing is, and I used this one actually with my students this year. It was basically eagles prepare for training. So, as a little baby eagle is getting ready to be kicked out of the nest and all that, what the parents do is they remove like all of the mud and the padding that was in there, and they make it so uncomfortable that that the little baby eagle wants to get out of there. So it's really the importance of leaving your comfort zone, because really, if you stayed in the nest, you would not leave the comfort zone. That's the comfort zone, so you would never reach growth, and you'd never really grow to your full potential. So yes. So I kind of remembered that, and I was like, you know what? And I don't know, in West Lafayette right now, in kind of Tippecanoe County, there are like 8 bald eagles that are like always like kind of on the Wabash and all that, and it's just amazing to see them when you get to see them when they're flying and all that. I mean, I know it's the national emblem and national symbol and all that, but man, they are just majestic birds, and they're so cool, especially when they're just sitting in the trees. So.
Well, it's Craig Voll, the bald eagle. So, well, Craig, I do appreciate you coming on the IATA podcast and appreciate all you've done for the IATA and your work and past president leadership. And so I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I just love the opportunity to talk. And again, it's like a proud papa moment, being engaged here with you and doing some stuff. So I'll look forward to your career, and maybe, I'll be interviewing you as a past president sometime in the
Mm.
future. So.
Time will tell. All righty, have a good one.
All right, thanks. You too. Talk to you later.
Thank you for tuning in to the Indiana Athletic Trainers Association podcast. We appreciate you taking time to listen and look forward to you joining us again on the next episode. To find out more about the IATA or to get in touch with us, you can visit our website or reach out via social media.